Casey Gray here from The Conscious Builder. On today's episode, we are with Bill Eggertson, and he was kind enough to give us a tour of his 1984 home, which he had purchased in 2006 and has done a ton of renovations to. He's actually the first microfit, I'm hoping I'm getting this right, but the first microfit in Eastern Ontario with solar panels. And the main topic of this conversation was really around geothermal, and I learned a ton. So there's all sorts of other things that we covered throughout this conversation, a lot about Bill's background and how long he's been in this sustainable energy field, and his opinion on a lot of different things, but mostly around geothermal. So this was, for myself, extremely educating because I haven't done a lot with geothermal. There hasn't been an opportunity for myself to work on this on projects. So please, without further ado, enjoy this conversation with myself and Bill Eggertson. All right, Bill. Well, thanks for joining us. We've already had some long conversations that maybe Brian was recording secretly and we'll add to the show. But there's two things. You've been in the industry, as I had pointed out, just as long as I've been alive. So I'm excited to learn from you. I've already learned a lot just sitting here. And so that obviously stood out. So you've been doing mostly geothermal work. You were a journalist. You have, well, if you want to expand on all things, we'll add the bio to the links below this video. But you were also trained by Al Gore, and that stood out to me. And I'm interested on how that came into play and what that was like, and how you really got into the industry in 1985 when it wasn't something that was talked about nearly as much as it is today. So where did it all begin, really?
I guess I was raised as an environmentalist. I mean, we recycled. My father was a bit of a, in my opinion, a bit of a nutcase. We recycled most of our garbage from the time I was young, newspapers, tin cans, bottles, the whole bit. He just didn't believe in litter. So, okay, yeah, it becomes second nature. You sort of do that automatically. One of the books that had a profound impact on me as a young kid was Club of Rome, Limits to Growth, that resources are limited. You know, we have to take care of what we've got. So that was very much the philosophy with which I was raised. And I guess it was in the mid-'80s, we elected a majority conservative government. The first and really only major chop that Mulroney did was he killed the Solar Programs Office at the National Research Council. So basically, Canada was a leader on R2000 building. We were very good because we've got cold winters. So a lot of Canadians were sort of saying, should we become more energy efficient? And the NRC campaign program was designed to do that. No, the OPEC oil crisis was finished. We had beaten those damn foreigners down. You know, oil was now back to at a lower level, never as low as it should have been pre-OPEC days. So therefore, you know, energy is no longer a crisis. And it didn't ring true to me. I thought, wait, you know, we've got limited energy. You can say, yeah, you know, prices are low, but once you run out of oil, once you run out of gas, once you run out of, and there are ways of improving it. Fracking hadn't been invented in those days. So there were, you know, some question marks, but to me it was, why do we need unlimited energy? And surely there is a better way of doing it. I think I stumbled into the Solar Energy Society of Canada. They were looking for an executive director. I had come from a staunch right business group, and I think I was the pendulum. I wanted to go left. So I applied for that job. I was told, hey, majority government has just canceled the program. We want the program back. I said, in your dreams, to my directors, you know, it's gone. You can't countermand a new populist government. The best thing you can do is keep the research going, keep the fires burning at a low level so that you keep people interested. And Sesky was very good. It had a large number of community, you know, grassroots groups around the country. So they would talk to homeowners about, maybe you should put in a piece of glass in your window, you know, to stop the energy from going out. Very, very, very simple stuff. But it was important to keep the dream alive that maybe we don't need to use as much energy. And we're a cold country, a large country. We use up a lot of fossil fuels driving from one side to the other. We use a lot of heat, heating our buildings, you know. Yeah. Wow, you know, Canada's a bad country when it comes to energy use and emissions use. Even in those days, it was clear that there was something wrong with the emissions. This was before the 97 Kyoto. So by the time 97 came along, and 1997, and Kyoto was signed, I thought I was on board. You know, I'd already worked in renewables, promoting solar PV. One of the first stories I worked on was National Defense wanted to put solar PV up at the alert base And so I went through a security clearance. I had to, DNA codes of my entire family history so that they could brief me. Because, of course, if the Russians knew how many solar panels were up at alert, they would know what the output was. They'd know exactly how much radar devices they were running. And I said, I don't care about that garbage. I just care about how much are you saving by putting in solar PV. So it works extremely well for 6 months of the year. They were helicoptering in.
Energy? Sorry, how much energy?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because they were helicopter trips every month, to take in the diesel. With solar, they didn't have to helicopter in for 4 of those 12 trips. They saved a third of their energy costs because the solar was running it. And of course, you've got almost 24-hour sunlight up north. So you throw in a couple of solar panels, you throw in a couple of batteries, it's running all of this radar early warning signal. National Defense said, shh, but it works extremely well. So I thought, so what are the other applications? And we were just getting into cell towers. And again, the cellular or microwave relay stations, they were starting to put stuff up on the high mountains in the Rockies with solar panels and wind turbines, because that meant you didn't have to get the diesel fuel in there. Right. So it was
remote places. That's where it made a lot of sense.
Exactly, yeah. And a lot of the progress in those early days were in the non-developed countries. I mean, we've got the oil pipelines here, we've got the route. So a lot of our work in the early days was watching what was going on in Central Africa, in the non-developed countries where they didn't have energy. So install the new energies. Little things to the extent there was a problem with pipelines, that sometimes local indigenous populations would hack into the pipeline to steal the gas and it would explode and kill a whole lot of people. Well, you can't do that if you've got solar panels. You can't steal them because they're useless if you don't know what you're doing. So there was benefits, cost savings. I mean, plus there were no emissions. It was a good thing to do. So I've been a believer in it for a long period of time, and I've jumped from technology to technology. I've come back to ground source because I think it is the largest silver bullet, if we can call it that, in terms of addressing Canada's energy needs.
So why do you think geothermal is that silver bullet? Because it's expensive. Like if we're talking from a residential perspective for the individual houses, it's expensive to supply and install. And from the installations that I've seen and talked to homeowners about that have had it done, it never performs as well as they think it's going to perform. So there's kind of two things, how do we address that? First of all, what are you working on? I'm definitely interested in that. And why does it not perform to what they've been told that it's going to perform to? Is that an installation issue? Is it a technology issue? I'm sure you know and have a lot to say about that.
Let me hang the dirty laundry out here. You are correct. A large number of systems have been oversold, underperformed, simply because it's more difficult to meter the amount of energy coming out of a ground source heat pump. There are a number of reasons why it may not work, and so a number of disreputable, less reputable dealers would oversell you the system that I took over after an Ontario Hydro rebate, and I saw an invoice. This lady was complaining about her system, and of course I'm now handling all of the complaints. She said, I was told I would never have to pay another electricity bill. And I said, may I see your invoice, please? Without calling her, you're crazy. The dealer had said, this will make your coffee in the morning and you'll never pay another hydro bill. There's not much I can do at that stage. She was lied to. She didn't have the knowledge base to, bad dealer, bad. He was out of business at this stage. This poor lady was shafted. I mean, there's no question about it. So that was an extreme issue. There was another one where a system was installed without a loop. Well, the performance really drops off if you don't have some way of collecting the energy. So there were a lot, there were a lot of problems.
Before you go into more detail, for those watching who may not have an idea of how a ground source heat pump works and understand what a loop is, there's a couple ways to install it, but how does it work, the basic technology behind it?
The most normal system that is the most dependable, the most reliable, is you install pipe through your backyard. You either go on a horizontal loop about 2 meters down, which is below the frost line. Below the frost line means you have heat, so in winter you are able to get the heat from below the frost line. Or you do vertical boreholes, which is the same thing. You're simply drilling straight down. There's a lot of heat down there, so you circulate a fluid that picks up the heat from down below, brings it back up into your house, and ejects it into the house. You can also have what are called open loop systems, which is where you're sucking water from a lake or river, whatever. There has to be heat in the river, lake. It comes in, you take the heat out, you throw it back into the same system. So it's closed loop versus open loop. Open loop, the problem is if you're anywhere near like the Rockies, the glacial aquifer cooling in summer means that your incoming water is not as warm as it needs to be. So, there are temporal flows and temperature swings. Closed loops, you've got complete total control over how much heat is there. Nothing really changes. But you can have either. A lot of cottages have these open loops. Again, throw two pipes out, one sucks in the water, takes the heat out, spits it out back into the river. So you're not interfering with the aquatic flow, you're not interfering with water levels, you're simply taking heat out.
Okay.
And you'd have to have a very small river with a very large number of cottages to make this have an impact.
That was going to be my next question is, does this affect the marine life of the...
No. There are rules over how the pipes go into the water and how you can suck it up. You have to stay away from fish. When you're putting it's called the base to hold the pipe there, you have to make sure that fish don't, aquatic life don't go around it. And hey, I have to admit that the way some of them are installed, I'd have to assume that some turtles have died in the technology. I love pointing out, my favorite game here in Ottawa is meeting with public office holders saying the second largest site in Canada is right here in Ottawa, and you don't know where it is. It is the Museum of Civilization. Both towers, so when you're driving down, both the office tower and the exhibits tower, 100% from the Ottawa River.
Oh, really?
Check next time you're there on the parkway in winter, there is no plume of steam or smoke. It's the only building that has no emissions. We wanted to get the War Museum, which is the same department, so they love it over at Heritage. Geez, I've forgotten the department that runs civilization, or Canadian history, sorry now. I said, so throw it into the War Museum. Long story, there wasn't enough thermal mass in the water in the Ottawa River because civilization was sucking most of the heat out, so they couldn't put two more pipes in to heat the War Museum, unfortunately.
Right.
But, the largest system is the Deep Lake Water Cooling System in Toronto, which takes in cold water from Lake Ontario, cools 50-ish buildings downtown, and the water is now slightly warmer by the time it goes to Toronto Water for distribution to people.
Right.
That's the largest.
That one I did know about because I read about that one.
Okay, yeah. But no,
That's great.
The Civilization Museum is the second largest site in Canada.
So now this lady didn't have a loop installed, which is basically how the whole system works.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the issues that comes up with these programs, these government-funded programs, is that a lot of companies all of a sudden pop up and say, yeah, we know what we're doing, we can do it, and then they basically shut down when the system is, or the program's taken away.
Yes.
What, as a homeowner, what can a homeowner do to make sure that they're hiring somebody who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to geothermal or solar or any of these technologies that are not your average, at least where we are, like natural gas or propane furnace, essentially?
And that's part of the job of the association. Raise the awareness level of consumers so that they understand what to look for. One of our sites had the top 50 questions to ask your dealer. So again, I'm not intending to make you a rocket science expert, but there are a certain number of questions that, and again, the dealer, if it's a bad dealer, may lie to you, but these are the type of questions you need to understand. You need to understand that it's providing heat, but it's what we call a slow heat. You can't wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, turn on your geo, and expect to have it go up 10 degrees Celsius in 20 minutes. Right. Some combustion furnaces will do that. Ours don't do that. It's a much slower rise of temperature. So we need to make people aware of that it's not on-off type operation. Mm-hmm. Again, check the references of this guy. Are people happy with his systems? Has he been in business for more than a week and a half? There are some, like insulation, like a number of the hidden technologies that go into your house. Yeah. It's easy. You're buying solar panels or a wind turbine. You can see a solar panel, you can see a wind turbine, you can see it turn, you can see a meter. If it's something a little bit more hidden, a little bit less obvious, there are certain questions that you as a consumer need to understand how to. Again, it would never have occurred to us to say there should be a loop in your ground. The fact that this system was installed without a loop whoops, somebody was asleep at the switch, and that person got shafted.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the system in your house. You bought this house in 2006, started doing a lot of work to it. What condition was it in when you purchased it? And I think the house was built in 86 or something?
Late 70s, yeah.
Oh,
so,
late 70s.
yeah, 70s, somewhere in the 70s, 80s.
Okay. And when you bought it in 2006, what kind of shape was it in?
It was in fairly good shape. The builder, who had since died, had built double wall construction. It is 1 degree off true south. The building, and I could tell that he had read the Ed Masra early passive solar. On June 21st, the sun from the eaves trough cuts off at the bottom of all the windows. So, I mean, there are certain concepts that my wife said, wow, look at the really thick windowsills. I said, wow, look at the double wall construction. Yeah. We were looking at the same thing. She was seeing the aesthetic, beautiful thing. I was looking at the, God. Yeah. I mean, I stumbled across in the basement. He had what is called a dummy load, so that a whole lot of light bulbs that when you've got too much power, so he had meant to put in something like solar or wind, and you have to burn off the extra electricity if you don't intend to store it in batteries by burning off a whole lot of light bulbs. So there were 2 or 3 things in this house that I said, click, 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 click. Part of the reason for moving out, we came from Westboro, where I had a beautiful design for a geothermal system. None of my members would come in to drill vertical boreholes through my driveway because they said, City of Ottawa, the city does not like people messing around with utilities. So out here, we not gutted, but close to gutted a lot of the stuff. The first thing I did was throw in granite countertops for my wife, because I had learned from the industry that when a couple buys a house, the most important thing is to have granite countertops. So I said to myself, throw the granite countertops in.
This is the eco-sin you talked about.
This is the eco-sin. And then I can say, by the way, dear, now I get to do the energy side, which she was okay with. So we didn't have to do, anecdotally, the funniest thing is I'm doing the house inspection. Our attic is not accessible to the house. You have to do an exterior thing. So my inspector was up there. We had 2-way radios. He said, there's no insulation up here. Shut up. I'm paying you by the hour. Get the job done. He said, climb up. The owner had forgotten to insulate the attic. So they had been on propane heat. They were paying an awful lot of money, obviously.
He did all this other work.
He died. He had died shortly after it was done. So I gathered there was, and because it's not a space that you go into a lot, they had closed it off. There was no record. How much should you be spending on propane heat? Yeah. So they hadn't clicked until my inspector went up there and said, it was minimal. So I think I negotiated $3,000 off the purchase price. I phoned up an insulation company for cellulose and said, I need $3,000, just blow it in, so it was better insulated than I needed. But again, so what? I was gearing up for that type of contingency. So we didn't have to do an awful lot. We have, since moving in though, replaced all of the windows because the windows were getting old. So we now have triple glazed, double low E argon gas fill. My windows are better than most people's walls. So I've got a very good energy footprint here. I don't consume an awful lot of energy. I can turn the geothermal on a cold winter day at 3 o'clock, 4 a.m. It'll work till 6:59 a.m. It shuts off so that I don't have to pay for peak electricity rates. I've got enough heat resident in the house. It'll last till almost 7 p.m. at night. Kick it in a little bit more to make sure that it's warm for sleeping. It shuts off till 3 o'clock in the morning again.
Right.
So I avoid peak energy consumption. My fridge, stove, things like that still use it.
The electricity, the electricity within the geothermal is really just to run the pumps.
Correct.
Right?
Pump, compressor, pump, distribution fan. Yeah.
Okay. And you did, are the pipes kind of behind us where
Yes.
we're sitting?
Yep.
How many feet of pipe did you need to install? Because you were talking before about how some systems are oversold.
Yes.
Under.
Yeah. Underinstalled, yes. The pipes, usually, bad dealers install the pipes too close to the surface because if you don't have to dig another foot, you're saving an awful lot of time. So therefore the price can be cheaper. You know, if you push it up another, well, you're now at the frost line, for God's sakes, you know, so there's a certain issue there. Yes, I was a certified dealer, so I installed it. I had a friend with a backhoe. He taught me how to use a backhoe. So I'm sitting out there digging the heck out of my backyard, digging this trench deeper than I needed to go.
Right.
I went down there, put in the pipes. I went longer because my member dealer who gave me the good deal, you know, you're going to ask a technical question of how many meters, I can't remember, but I bought 20% more pipe, dug 20% more trench, dug it 20% deeper. I've never had a problem with my system.
And that amount that you needed, was that based on calculations that you had done for the heat load?
Yes, you have to do a CSA F280 heat loss, so that you enter a bunch of numbers into a program and it says, your heat load is X thousand BTUs. What's a BTU? You know, but nonetheless, you can convert it to actual real stuff. And then you have to buy the geothermal that is matched to the heat loss, heat load. I even installed an electric plenum backup in case, you know, for that time where I want 20 degrees more in the next hour, I could flip it on and it's a mother-sized electric resistance heat. I turn it on for 5 minutes every winter at the start of the heating season to burn the dust off. I've never actually used it. So I paid $200-$400, you know, for a nice electric unit that I'm not using. I could, if we had an ice storm and, you know, the house becomes ice, or we've got some type of climate change that freezes the heck out of although it's going the other way, but, you know, if something goes wrong, I do have that contingency.
Right.
So everything I've designed here is meant for the person who takes over from me, buys this house, who is not a geek like I am. It will still work for a non-geek.
So it's simple.
It's simple. Yeah, exactly. I'd probably have to write out the note saying this is how you do it and this is how you set the thermostat. But no, having a house that is absolutely impossible for a normal person to understand is a bit of a liability.
Yeah.
So everything here is meant to be user-friendly.
And then the other thing you did in 2006, you were the first first, I guess, installation for the microfit, if I understand correctly?
In Eastern Ontario. And the reason for that was I was working for the UK government. I'm the person who actually brought over Nicholas Stern. We met with Dalton McGuinty, who was Premier at the time, on this whole idea of Nicholas Stern wrote the penultimate book on climate change, that you can either spend X dollars now to address climate change, or you can spend 10X, you know, a couple of years down the road, fixing the flood damage and the Emerald Ash Borer and all of the other stuff. So therefore, do it now. And we met with Dalton McGuinty, and Stern pitched solar, and it was pitched in a way that if you set up a whole lot of solar production, Samsung was the ultimate supplier, and you pay people to put in solar panels, you can kickstart a market. You then become the supplier to the northeastern United States, Quebec and Manitoba. You become the king of solar and wind because you are throwing money at starting something. The way you do with auto plants, you know, you give Honda and Toyota X years of free tax and payroll tax. So they set up their plant, they employ people, blah, blah, blah. You know, it was an exact replica, but this is clean energy. And Ontario at the time was very heavy into coal. So, I mean, Dalton, the Premier, understood exactly. You know, I was one of the nicest moments of my life. This man understood. He was lobbied. Make it 80 cents a kilowatt hour. Do a whole lot of stuff that was not sustainable. Germany at the time was paying 50 cents equivalent, and they are a very high-priced energy country. We paid far more than we should have. So, I mean, I've got major complaints with it, but because I knew what was coming down the pipe, I found a dealer here, a solar dealer here in Ottawa. He said, I'll install the panels on your roof if the program doesn't come out, if you don't get the contract, if, I'll take the panels off your roof. I thought, sort of a no win for me, or no lose for me. Yeah. But we hit all of the issues that Measurements Canada went from series to parallel connections. I had fights with Hydro Ottawa because they couldn't understand what you want to give us power? No, I want to sell you power. There's a big difference. Had to go through meters, blah, blah, blah. So I hit all of these problems. Some of them, we changed our roof from asphalt shingles to metal roof because solar panels work better on metal than they do on asphalt. The asphalt will continue to degrade. At some point, I would have had to take the panels off, fix the roof, reinstall the panels. The industry never told people this, so a lot of people with asphalt shingles now, after X years, are having to take the panels off, replace the asphalt, and put the panels back on. I mean, we just went with metal. So there were a lot of things that You know, I did as again, I know some of this stuff. I'd worked with the solar industry for a number of years, you know, so this would make sense to me. But yeah, we were the first in Eastern Ontario. We got to hit all of the teething pains. We had to threaten Hydro Ottawa at some stage, pay me after 6 months, I think, before they could issue the first check, because they weren't used to issuing checks. They were used to cashing checks.
Right.
So a lot of fights, but again, you know, you love being a trail.
Because of you, it got easier for other people.
I guess, yeah, those darn people.
Yeah.
I've even been to the House of Commons on testimony, and one of the senators asked this question: how much did it cost? And I said, with respect, sir, you mean what was my investment? Because yes, there is a cost, but if you can invest X amount of dollars, it's like investing in a garden. Yeah, there's a lot of time and a lot of work, but you're getting vegetables after a while. You know, all the things you do, you invest. So it's not a cost. It's not a one-time. What's your payback is technically the way you should be asking the question, because I'm making it a better house, higher consumer occupant comfort for my wife and I. It works extremely well. I have no emissions here. I mean, I'm not on the chart when it comes to carbon emissions. In terms of electricity usage, I'm only off peak. Hydro Ottawa should love me. So there are a number of, and because I'm obviously a bit of an advocate for sustainability, you know, to me, that's not a cost. That was an investment in helping to show that the planet can be saved.
And that's a really good point. And I think a lot of homeowners, like I think just humans in general, are very short-sighted, right? So they're looking at what's the initial cost, and we have trouble thinking further ahead. So yeah, what that shingle roof is only going to cost me, you know, $8,000 instead of $20,000 for the steel roof, right? But you won't ever have to change it in the rest of the time that you own this house, right? But then people are like, well, I'm only going to live here 5 years, and there's that whole argument, right? So, you know, how, in your opinion, like, how do we get people to start thinking beyond, you know, 3 or 4 years? You know, how do we really up the ante, you know, and get people to think beyond themselves, sort of thing, and think of it as an investment and not a cost or an expense of some sort?
I hope that the trend has started, specific to climate change. People now realize climate change isn't going to destroy the world tomorrow. It will destroy the world over a period of years. I mean, it happens, in my opinion, is accelerating. We're able to see the Antarctic melt, you know, and they say in X years, this means coastal water levels will rise X. You know, so if you've got a cottage on the coast, or your family lives on the coast, that's a bit of a problem. You are starting to worry about it. The religious groups have been heavily involved with this, that it's, you know, God's creation. I prefer to go with, it's my kids' property, my grandkids. I want them to have something that, a little bit of what I've got. So it's a very hard thing, because most people are short cycles, self-focused. They don't understand the issue. So all I can do with the associations and campaigns I deal with is explain to you, slap you across the face, say, this is what's going to happen if you continue to be a pig-headed moron. We've got proof around the world, you know, the south of us, that let's go for more coal. I mean, something has disconnected there, that some things are more important to some people than others. I happen to care about the planet. I happen to care about the environment. And all you can do is hope that other people get involved. But we also sell it on a cost factor. I'm paying an awful lot less per square foot of my house than most people are. So do you want to save money as well as save the planet? It's a bifurcated operation that hopefully will catch on.
Well, I love the fact that you're here in Ottawa. Well, I guess on the outskirts of Ottawa, close to me anyways, and the fact that you're leading by example. We definitely need more advocates like you. But let's go showcase some of your equipment inside and explain to us how it works.
Okay.
Thanks for watching part 1 of this interview with Bill. Part 2 will be coming out soon, so if you're interested in seeing part 2, be sure to subscribe.